Hi folks. Before I get into this, I should give a disclaimer. The content of this report is very disturbing. Um, I'm not going to be showing any pictures or anything like that. I'll put a link to the report, but I do warn you that the details are very disturbing. Um, so if you've been through a particularly traumatic experience, maybe be wary about listening to this further. But in the vein of my channel, in relation to what I said earlier, it's one of those things I think has to be discussed, has to be looked at, because this is in our society. It's not a million miles away, it's in our society. Actually, this reminds me a bit of a case that happened in Japan in 1989, involving a young woman called, I think her name was Junko Kikuchi. Um, I'll just double check that actually. She actually died in that case. I'll just double check that too. Sure. Excuse me, Junko Furuta. That was 1989 and that was in Japan, so it just reminded me of that case. Um, anyway, I'm going to read out the report. This is from the Oxford Mail, and the reporter is Tom Seward, who's a crime and court reporter. And again, I warn you, the details are graphic. But there's things I want to talk about around this. A drug-fueled gang of feral youngsters tortured their so-called friend during an ordeal that saw her burned with cigarettes, force-fed heroin, and raped. Ringleader Sonny Ware, 20, was egged on by love interest Natasha Washington, 20, as they subjected their victim, who was known to them, to more than 12 hours of bullying violence after the latter lured her former friend to the Banbury flat. They were joined in their depraved torture of the woman by Alexander Acevedo, 21, in whose flat the ordeal took place on June the 21st last year, and then 16-year-old Arges Salaj, who can now be named after the judge lifted a reporting restriction that banned his identification. After hours of on-off abuse which saw Washington Weir and Acevedo force a woman to smoke heroin, the couple disappeared to have sex in a bedroom while Acevedo raped her in the living room. The romp complete, Washington and Weir tied her to a chair, then beat her until she was badly bruised. Acevedo then sent her home in a taxi. Jailing the gang for a total of 35 years at Oxford Crown Court this afternoon, Judge Nigel Daly said this all went for something like 12 to 16 hours. She was totally abused, humiliated, and tortured. It included, excuse me, it included, as I say, forcing her to take heroin and eventually being raped. Had I not heard the evidence, I do not think I would have believed this sort of thing could have happened between so-called friends and acquaintances. I was shocked not only by the events covered in this indictment, but by the lifestyle that you described, the lifestyle you were leading, as if it was in some way normal. None of you were over 20 years. You seem to have descended into a life of drug-fueled debauchery, displaying a total lack of morality or self-control. Summarizing the night of torture at Friday's sentencing hearing, prosecutor Patrick Duffy said this is a brutal set of offences. These four defendants initiated a campaign of violence and threats against the complainant, inducing her in a state of terror as they falsely imprisoned her, abused her, assaulted her, and in the case of Acevedo, raped her. Washington lured her to the flat on the false premise of a party, the prosecutor said. She was held against her will in Acevedo's flat for 12 to 16 hours. Weir locked the doors and told the victim no one is leaving. Washington began the ordeal by branding her a pig and a snitch, while love interest Weir rang Salaj and told him to come over and beat the shit out of this girl before telling the victim to shut the fuck up or I'll stab you. That's verbatim. That threat was followed up later with Weir holding a knife to her face and demanding to know where she wanted to be cut. You will be scarred for the rest of your life, he told her. Over the evening, she was made to drink chili sauce and the contents of a bottle of water used as an ashtray. Cigarettes were stubbed on her skin. She was made to eat garlic granules, beaten with a hairbrush and vacuum cleaner parts, and had pliers applied to her tongue by Washington and Acevedo. Salaj booted her as she was on the ground being forced to clean up. The youngster also spat at her and scrubbed her skin using a dishcloth scourer pad. The young victim was made to stand in the shower while the defendant switched between hot and cold water. Her hair was cut by Weir using a knife, then later by Washington using scissors. Feared that she would be killed and her body dumped in the woods. Salad said they could get a van and take her out to the woods and kill her. Washington suggested they could leave her in a tent in the woods. Mr. Duffy said the evidence implied that Salad wanted to see the woman's semi-naked torso, asking her to remove her arms from when they were crossed over her chest. Salad, told you to move your arms. Fucking move your arms and listen to him, Weir told the victim. Having taken drugs before she visited the flat and taken cocaine at points during the evening, her nose was held and she was forced to smoke heroin by the three older participants, and Weir made her take Valium. Paula Weir telling a crackhead, I'll show you a crackhead. The victim was filmed singing a song about being a crackhead in the footage uploaded to her Snapchat. Later, Washington and Weir disappeared to a bedroom to have sex, left alone with the victim. Acevedo raped her. The sofa then told her to clean herself up when he had finished. Washington and Weir returned from the bedroom, tied the victim to a chair and beat her. Rapist Acevedo put her in a taxi and sent her home, where a shocked mum saw her and took her to A&E after speaking to her in the kitchen. When the woman arrived at the hospital, the police were called. She told detectives in a video recorded interview played to jurors at the trial in February, I genuinely thought I was never going to see my family again. I was thinking, well, no one's going to know I'm here. My family don't know I'm here. No one's going to find me or what happened to me. The defense. Mitigating Justin Rouse QC said his client had a tragic and traumatic childhood during which he had struggled with mental health difficulties. He's QC for Solage. He had returned to his flat on the night to find it in disarray. The ward started and it wasn't entirely clear why. Um, Actually, I think that's for Acevedo. The barrister challenged the prosecution's characterization of the rape as among the most serious type when looking at the sentencing guidelines. He pointed to a conversation Acevedo and the victim had about a contraceptive implant in their arm and suggested he may have had an unreasonable belief consenting to sex. Acevedo was said to be remorseful and had shown empathy to the victim. It sounds like a hell of a lot of empathy. That's just Emma Woodcay for Washington challenged the suggestion the victim was lured to the flat. This was a spontaneous act of violence, she said. Her client had previously been a dental nurse, but during the pandemic was put on furlough and developed a drug habit. She had expressed remorse for what she described as a depraved and shameful behaviour and was determined to be a better person. Yeah, hopefully after your long prison sentence. Niall Thompson for Weir said her client had a particularly difficult upbringing. He was stabbed as a teenager and had also fallen into dealing drugs. He had the potential to be a decent member of society in the future and was not a lost cause. I would question that. Weir, whose previous convictions included conspiracy to supply drugs, was also arrested on Friday for a single count of being concerned in an offer to supply Class B drugs. He was stopped in the company with another young man at Bournemouth railway station on October the 27th, 2020. The pair had £500 in cash and a burner phone containing messages linking them to drug supply. Julian Lynch for Solage said the teen's involvement was a much lower level than the others in the dock. His client was only in the flat for a couple of hours and was not involved in the worst of the offending. Having left school at 16, his father got cancer and the teen obtained work rafting all hours of the day. A series of character references spoke of him as a polite and dedicated young man who only went into a flat for 2 hours while a young woman was being tortured. Sadaj was acquitted of the most serious counts he faced, allegations of urinating on her and pouring boiling water in her shod foot. He asked the judge to pass a sentence that would spare him an immediate spell in custody, saying the community would probably be safer if he was kept out of prison. I don't know the logic in that. Acevedo of Britannia Wharf, Banbury, was convicted of rape, false imprisonment, administering heroin and ABH. He was found not guilty of one count of ABH. I assume that's a different category of ABH, and administering Valium. He goes to jail for 15 years. Weir of Pope Walk, Banbury, was cleared making a threat to kill and one ABH count, but convicted of administering a noxious substance with intent, false imprisonment, and ABH. He received a 9.5 year sentence, including a 6 month sentence for dealing drugs in Bournemouth. I don't know how he was cleared of the threat to kill, because he held a knife to the girls. I mean, he did. Um, Washington, of no fixed address, was convicted of false imprisonment, ABH, and administering heroin, but acquitted of administering Valium with intent. She was jailed for 8 years. Salad, 17, who can be named after the judge lifted reporting restrictions, was convicted of false imprisonment, ABH, common assault, and battery. He was cleared of pouring hot water on her foot and urinating over her. He was sentenced to 3 years in a Young Offenders Institute, which is pathetic. Reacting to the sentencing, Mark Thompson for the Crown Prosecution Service said the dreadful violence showing towards this young woman was truly senseless. Alexander Esofedo's offences are especially horrific, taking place at a time when she was in no fit state to object to any sexual acts or to defend herself. The victim's bravery, giving police interviews, providing as much evidence as she could, is truly commendable, and she was vital in helping us secure the convictions. I hope today's sentences allow her to bring some closure to this chapter of her ordeal. Right. That's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It's like something from Clockwork Orange. I've heard of similar cases before, so this case isn't unique, but it's particularly horrendous. I see why Acevedo got the heaviest sentence because he raped her. I think Weir and Washington should have got much stiffer sentences. Personally would propose, if I was to sentence these four, I think ideal sentences, given their involvement, given the nature of their crimes, I'd give Acevedo 20 to 25 years. I'd give Weir and Washington 15 to 20 years, and I would give Solage 7 to 10 years. I think all the sentences are too soft, um, given the prolonged nature of this. Um, there's a few things. Firstly, it's good that for once the judge made the right call in naming the youngest offender, because I take the view if you can, you could drive at 16. Now, I do not understand this absurd notion of cannot be named for legal reasons. I can understand not naming an 11-year-old defendant, but a 16-year-old, I personally think offenders should be named from, say, 15 upwards. Um, Probably not younger than that because they are technically children, but a 16-year-old who can legally drive, hell yeah. Um, I also have to say the involvement of drugs, the number of crimes in this country, the number of serious, gratuitous crimes that involve heavy drugs, just reiterates how evil these nasty substances are. And those who want universal legalization, I mean, they would say, oh, well, if it's universally legalized, you take drugs off the hands of drug dealers. But I don't see how that would make any difference to the sort of impact it has on someone's mind. How it can make someone who was a dental nurse become, an accomplice to torture and rape. It, that's drugs. That is drugs. The fact they've all expressed remorse, I wouldn't put too much weight on that because I mean, not having been in the courtroom, I don't trust that. I don't believe someone who would subject a young woman to torture for 12 hours would suddenly find the light and think, oh, well, I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. No, that just doesn't watch with me. I do not think in that space of time you could, um, and yeah, maybe the drugs influence it, but I just think it's pure evil. It's absolutely pure evil. Um, and that's it really. What's the point of this video? Well, it's to reiterate what drugs do, in part. Unquestionably, their actions were influenced by that, but also about the nature of sentencing. It's not the most lenient sentences I've ever seen, but they'll probably get early release, and that is utterly perverse. That has to end. On the subject of law and order, incidentally, I'll just um, actually, I might bring it into another video. I was going to talk about restorative justice. I'll bring that into another video, but I'll round this up. It's frightening. It's horrendous. It's evil, and I mean, we're in Washington. I think were particularly sadistic. Acevedo was the rapist. I think Weir and Washington appear to be have been the most violent. Um, so I think they should have got sentences at least on par with Acevedo. Salad probably compared to the others was less, but I find it impossible to believe that he was there for 2 hours and he didn't know what was going on, as if he was somehow less responsible. I mean, he'd done nothing to stop the others. He should have either tried to stop them or at least have got out of there and contacted the police. Of course, that's wishful thinking. But no, he stayed for 2 hours. Uh, I mean, if he was a polite and intelligent young man, and this thing about mental health being used as an excuse, anyone who's ever suffered depression could use it as an excuse. It's truly evil, and I just hope this young woman can somehow rebuild her life. I'll put a link to the case, but be warned, it is, well, it's graphic.